Thank you for joining me. We are speaking about creating lesson plans for effective instruction. We have already talked about the first step, determine the unit of instruction. In this video, I'm going to talk about the second step, which is developing lesson objectives. I'm just going to move quickly through the affective domain. Remember, as cognitive domain has to do with knowledge, thinking, affective level, we are dealing with the heart, feeling and doing. There are 5 general categories, and first one is receiving. First one is receiving. Now, very important point. Please stop here and pay attention to this. Affective domain assumes that cognitive learning has already taken place. In other words, without knowing the definition, without the ability to, let's say, take things apart, put it back together, you cannot move up here. So it assumes that cognitive, in other words, clear understanding is there. So in one sense, we can say affective domain is built upon cognitive domain. The first category is receiving. What is receiving? Definition. Students become aware of something that is taught. Students become aware of something that is taught. In other words, they willingly receives the information, or a behavior is received. Based on what they have learned, a new behavior is received. Remember, affective has to do with attitude. So a new behavior is received. For example, based on what they have learned, all of a sudden they have understood the need for community service. So from that point onwards, they are committed to community service. Next one is responding. Responding. That is, the students participate actively and react in some way. They actively participate and react in some way. Now remember, receiving is they receive an attitude or they receive a behavior. Here, a behavior is received and he is responding to that positively. Responding to that positively. An example maybe, let's say, a student, he understood the definition of sin, and let's assume that he has moved through the cognitive category. At this level, without being prompted, he comes to you and he puts together a new presentation on sin. Or he is participating in out of class discussions with some of his peers and maybe some of the juniors. See, he is responding. He is participating actively and he is reacting in some way. Next one, right above that, in the affective domain is valuing. Valuing. Student attaches a certain amount of worth, certain amount of price, cost, or value to an object, phenomenon, or behavior. He attaches a certain amount of value, worth to an idea, object, phenomenon, or behavior. Next one is organization. Organization is combining of values, different values, resolving conflict between values and beginning to form his own value system. remember, his own lifestyle. So he is able to combine different values. He is able to resolve the conflict that exists between the values. Now he is beginning to put his own value system together. The final one within the affective category, affective domain, is characterization. Characterization. Value systems that he has developed has stayed with him for a long or for a period of time, and eventually, because it has stayed with him for a period of time, eventually he is controlled by it. He is dominated by it. It has become part and parcel of his fabric. Sometimes, a student comes in and you have to teach them what is quiet time, what is personal devotion. You may have to, this is a Bible, but you know what? He has moved through that. Now, you know what? He cannot live without spending time with God in the morning and in the evening. Why? He is characterized by it. He is controlled by it. Now, this is the affective domain. And we have seen receiving, responding, valuing, organizing, and characterizing or characterization. Now that you have basically all the information that you need to understand these two domains, the cognitive domain and the affective domain. How is this going to help you in your classroom instruction? This is going to give you some very clear targets. When you go to the classroom, you're not just going there to teach something. It's going to help you to focus your attention. Well, this is precisely what I want to accomplish in the class today. Now, the question, I know you have this question running through your mind. Is it possible? Is it possible for me to take a student from the knowledge level, let's say all the way up to the analysis level? Is it possible? You know what? If you say no immediately, I will question you. Because you know what? You haven't tried it yet, or you may not have tried it yet. So give it a try. This is tried and true principle. Many people have tried it. I know I have tried it. These two domains, I hope you have been able to get a good hold of it. Now let me make something clear here, especially the cognitive domain. It has gone through a couple of revisions since then, and what I have done here, I have given to you the original cognitive domain. Basically, you have all the information that you need to work through these domains. Now let's talk about how this is going to apply to your own life, your own teaching life. Here are 5 benefits of having instructional objectives. 5 benefits. Number 1, lesson objectives. They provide a focus for instruction. They provide a focus for instruction. Let's say you have 2 or 3 lesson objectives for a particular period. You know what? So you have written down, you have taken the time, you thought through, you have written it down. So you can focus all your energy, all the classroom activities, whatever teaching method that you are going to do, you can focus it on just that. So they provide a focus for instruction. Number 2, they provide guidelines for learning. They provide guidelines for learning. If you inform the student, well, this is what I want to accomplish in the class today, you know what? It's clear for them. So if they can master whatever one or two things you are telling them, well, I want you to write first 5 letters of the Greek alphabet. So you have told the student, this is what I'm trying to do in class today. So by the end of the class, student, well, can I write or can I not? So this is going to provide some kind of guidelines for learning. Thirdly, they provide targets for assessment. They provide targets for assessment. In other words, let's say your objective was to teach first 10 letters of the Greek alphabet. Well, at the end of the class, you can evaluate to see whether they can do that. See, it's going to give you very clear targets for evaluation or assessment. Number 4, they provide instructional intent to others. They provide instructional intent to others. So let's say a third party, you have the teacher, you, and your pupil. Then let's say you have somebody else, your supervisor, the head of your department or somebody. So when he takes a look at your teaching plan or lesson plan, well, this is what he is trying to accomplish in the class on that given day. So your lesson objectives, it's going to provide your instructional intent to others. Lastly, they provide for evaluation of instruction. They provide evaluation of instruction. So the head of the department can come and evaluate not the student, you're teaching. So if this is what you have written down on your lesson plan, did the teacher achieve that today? This is going to give us some target, some boundary within which we can evaluate your teaching. I want you to know that these benefits of instructional objectives came from this book, and once again may I encourage to look this up and possibly buy. Now let's move on. Now we need to know, how do I write a lesson objective? I have to take you there, right? It's one thing to talk about having all these things. You can talk about these domains and different categories, but basically, how do I write a lesson objective? Number 1, always start with the student. Always start with the student. That is, this is the way I do it. I write the student will, not I will teach, the student will. So instead of looking at this, instead of looking at learning from your perspective, you're looking at from the student's perspective. Okay, at the end of this class hour, what will she accomplish? So always start with the student. Next, what you want to do is to ask yourself, what do I want my students to be able to do, to know, to feel at the end of this class hour? You need to ask yourself that question. So, as a result of sitting in my class for 50 to 55 minutes, what do I want them to know? What do I want them to learn? What do I want them to become? You ask that question based on, remember we have already selected the topic. So as a result of sitting in your classroom, what do I want my students to be able to do at the end of this class hour? Then what you must do is to select an active verb which describes the outcome. Select an active verb that describes the outcome. The student will write. See, we are talking about Greek alphabets. Okay, so write, active verb. may I call your attention to this book again. This is going to give you a wealth of information. In fact, see here, I don't know if you can see, but if you can, it says here illustrative verbs. Now, he has given to you here general instructional objectives. That is probably not for a particular class period. He's talking about an entire course. But then there are so many, a list of specific learning outcomes. So we are very focused. We are talking about a classroom. So he has a complete list here for what he calls language behavior. So listen to some of the active verbs that he has listed here. Abbreviate, edit, hyphenate, outline, punctuate, read, recite, say, sign, speak, tell, translate, verbalize, write, whisper. See, all these you can use in the classroom depending on what you're teaching. For example, let's say you are introductory class on Greek language, you're just introducing your students to the Greek alphabets. Well, you can say, well, the student will say or pronounce the first 10 letters. Oh, okay, it's very specific. Or the students will write. So, as a result of sitting in your class on that particular period, they will learn how to write or pronounce or say. This is an amazing list of things. So what you want to do, you select an active verb which describes the outcome. Make sure when you select a verb, you can accomplish that within that hour. You need to be careful. Lastly, fourthly, conclude the sentence with a reference to the topic that you are teaching. And you don't need to do this every single time, but if you are teaching a Sunday school class, or in other words, let's say week to week, it differs, this is going to help. So, conclude the sentence with a reference to the topic that you are teaching. For example, the student will write Greek first 10 letters of the Greek alphabet. Remember, you are teaching Greek, so you are making a connection to that subject. So conclude the sentence with a reference to the topic that you are teaching. And lastly, check and rewrite if necessary. You write a lesson objective. Don't assume just because you have written it, it's right or it's very good. Check and rewrite. Sometimes, you may not have selected the right verb. Sometimes, may not be precise. You may not be able to accomplish within 1 hour. So always check and rewrite if necessary. Now, let's put this into practice. Let's say I'm teaching a Sunday school class on Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 20. You know the story. Christ is speaking, and he is saying, moreover, if your brother sins against you, you go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. You know the rest of the chapter. Now, if I am teaching that, here is one lesson objective. I have written down, the student will identify 3 responses Christians need to have in resolving conflicts with another Christian. I will repeat. The student will identify 3 responses Christians need to have in resolving conflicts with another Christian. See, I started with the student. My active verb there is identify. I have asked myself beforehand, well, as a result of sitting in my class, what do I want them to do? No. Well, I want them to identify three things, three responses that we need to have when we deal with another brother. So, this is how you write it. Now, let's put this through a test here. Because you know the passage, there are three responses, this is listed there. That's why I am very precise in that. Now let's think about 1 second here. You know, when I talk about this, student will identify three responses. You know what? I may be I am in the cognitive domain for sure. Maybe at the knowledge, maybe breaking into the comprehension level. Not beyond that, really. Okay. Now you can think, how could I move them up? Alright, as a teacher you think, maybe you can say something to them. Well, now you know three responses that you need to have in dealing with your brother in solving an issue. During the course of this week, would you just start thinking about, well, do I have any issues with anybody else? Maybe within your family, maybe within the church. See, you are causing them to think. So when you come back next Sunday, maybe, I don't want you to say the names or anything, but tell me what you have done to settle the issues. Now you are pushing them up to the application level. You're not just dumping some information to them and leaving it there, you're forcing them. So let's put this objective through a test. Is it clear? I think it's clear. You know, I only have 55 minutes. I think I can accomplish this. Is it specific? Yeah, I think it's very specific. I'm not talking about 10 reasons or countless reasons. I'm talking about three responses that they need to have. Is it limited? Yeah, it is limited. I think so. Is it well defined? Sure, I think so. We are talking about three responses that you find in this passage. Now, is it achievable? Can they achieve that within that class hour? Remember, I simply want them to identify response number 1, response number 2, response number 3. Can they identify? I think it's achievable within a class period. And measurable. Can I measure? Can I assess to see whether they can identify? I think it is doable. Now, if you were here, I would have given you a couple of assignments to help you to do this, but take some time to do it. Now, let me close here. An amazing teacher of mine said it this way. He said, if you don't have an aim, you are going to hit it every time. Listen to that. If you don't have an aim, you are going to hit it every time. In other words, if you don't have an aim when you walk into the classroom, whatever you accomplish or whatever you don't accomplish, that becomes your aim. You know what? Sometimes you have just blown hot air for 55 minutes. Students are sitting there just praying, Lord, come back and help me, save me from this situation. No, have an aim. Develop lesson objectives for effective in. Now, would you take some time to develop lesson objectives for effective instruction?